You know what they say about Tuesdays, nothing good ever happens on a Tuesday. Well, whoever said that clearly never had massive alien warships park themselves over every major city on Earth like they owned the place. Because that's exactly what happened at 0947 hours, Eastern Standard Time, on what I now call Black Tuesday. My name is Commander Jake Morrison, but everyone calls me Tank, not because I'm built like one. Mind you, I got the nickname after I accidentally drove an actual tank through the Pentagon commissary during a training exercise. A long story. The point is, I'm supposedly humanity's top space defense coordinator, which is about as useful as it sounds when your entire space defense consists of 3 satellites held together with duct tape and hope. I was enjoying my morning coffee and contemplating the futility of existence when every alarm in the Strategic Defense Command started screaming like banshees at a death metal concert. My aide, Lieutenant Peters, burst through my office door looking like he'd seen a ghost wearing a clown costume. "Sir, we have a situation." "Define situation, Peters. Are we talking spilled coffee situation or incoming asteroid situation?" "More like massive alien fleet hovering over Washington, New York, London, Tokyo, and pretty much every other major city on the planet situation, sir." I nearly choked on my coffee. Nearly. I've been in this job long enough to know that the universe has a twisted sense of humor, and Tuesday was apparently comedy night. "How many ships are we talking about, Peters?" "Preliminary count shows approximately 2,000 vessels, sir, each one roughly the size of a city block. 2,000 ships. I did some quick math and realized we were approximately 1,997 ships short of having a fair fight. But hey, who's counting?" Within 30 minutes, every world leader was on conference calls, screaming at each other in 17 different languages, while accomplishing absolutely nothing. The president was demanding to know why our early warning systems didn't detect ships the size of Manhattan floating around in space. The Secretary of Defense was having what appeared to be a minor breakdown. The Joint Chiefs were arguing about whether we should nuke them or send a fruit basket. Then the aliens decided to introduce themselves. The ships simultaneously broadcast a message on every frequency known to mankind. The voice was smooth, cultured, and carried the kind of confidence that comes from owning the biggest stick in the galaxy. "Greetings, inhabitants of the planet you call Earth. We are the Dominion Collective. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. You have 24 hours to surrender unconditionally, to comply, and your deaths will be swift. Resist. Resist. And we will demonstrate why civilizations across the galaxy fear our approach. This message will not be repeated." And just like that, the line went dead. The silence in the Situation Room was deafening. You could practically hear everyone's career ambitions evaporating. The president looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. The Secretary of Defense was quietly hyperventilating into a paper bag. "Well," I said, breaking the silence. That was refreshingly direct. No small talk, no cultural exchange, just straight to the apocalyptic threats. I almost respect their efficiency. Everyone stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Sir," the president said slowly, "do you have a plan?" I leaned back in my chair and smiled, not because I was confident, not because I had some brilliant strategy. I smiled because after 15 years of dealing with bureaucratic nonsense, budget cuts, and politicians who thought space defense meant buying more telescopes, the universe had finally given me something interesting to work with. "Mr. President," I said, "I might just have the most stupidly dangerous idea in human history." 2 hours after the aliens crashed our planetary party, I was standing in Hangar 7 at the Experimental Defense Facility, looking at humanity's last hope. And let me tell you, it was not an inspiring sight. The facility was officially called the Advanced Prototype Development Center, but everyone who worked there called it the reject bin. This was where the military sent projects too weird, too dangerous, or too likely to violate the laws of physics to put anywhere else. It was also where they sent personnel who were too talented to fire but too unconventional to promote. In other words, it was perfect. "Tank, you magnificent bastard, what brings you to our humble corner of organized chaos?" That was Dr. Ruby Vex, the facility's chief weapons engineer and certified mad scientist. She was 5 feet of pure concentrated brilliance wrapped in grease-stained coveralls and held together by caffeine and sheer stubbornness. Ruby had been kicked out of 3 different universities for conducting experiments that the ethics committees called morally questionable, and she called thoroughly entertaining. "Ruby, we need to discuss your little pet projects, specifically how many of them can kill aliens." Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Oh, Tank, you beautiful Nan. Are we finally going to find out if my theory about weaponized gravity works in practice?" Before I could answer, something crashed into the far wall of the hangar, followed by a string of creative profanity that would make a sailor blush. Captain Felix Murphy emerged from the wreckage of what used to be a perfectly good flight simulator, brushing debris from his uniform. "Crash," I called out, "still working on your landing techniques?" "Hey, Tank. And for the record, that wasn't a crash, that was a controlled collision with extreme prejudice. Crash Murphy was the best pilot humanity had ever produced. Assuming you defined best as most likely to survive doing impossible things in flying machines that should have fallen apart years ago. He'd earned his nickname not because he crashed often, but because when he did crash, it was always spectacular enough to make the evening news." "Where's Nova?" I asked. "The conference room. Probably explaining to some alien why their mother was a particularly unattractive space hamster," Ruby said. "She intercepted their communications about an hour ago." Lieutenant Nova Pierce was our communications specialist, which was a polite way of saying she could hack any system, decode any language, and translate insults with surgical precision. She'd joined the military after getting kicked out of METI for turning the dean's computer into a very expensive doorstop. I found Nova in the communications center, surrounded by screens showing alien text and wearing headphones that were probably picking up signals from 3 galaxies away. "Tank, perfect timing. I've been listening to our new neighbors, and I have good news and bad news." They hit me with the bad news first. "The bad news is they're not kidding about the whole cleansing thing. They've done this to 47 other planets. Apparently it's their standard operating procedure. And the good news." Nova grinned like a shark who'd just spotted a particularly tasty swimmer. "The good news is they're bureaucrats. Every single one of their communications follows the same pattern: request for surrender, inventory of local resources, scheduling of orbital bombardment. They're running this invasion like a corporate takeover. Meaning? And meaning? Meaning they've never actually fought anyone stupid enough to fight back. Every other species just rolled over and surrendered." I gathered my team around the conference table, where we'd laid out blueprints for every crazy project the facility had been working on. Ruby's experimental weapons, Crash's modified fighters, Nova's communication jammers, and a dozen other devices that existed somewhere between theoretically possible and completely insane. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "in approximately 22 hours, the most powerful military force in the galaxy is going to try to wipe us out. We have exactly 17 ships that might actually fly, weapons that have never been tested outside of computer simulations, and a plan that violates several laws of physics." Ruby raised her hand. "Question. Are we going to die horribly?" "Almost certainly." "Good. I was worried this might be boring." Crash leaned back in his chair. "So what's the plan, Tank?" I looked at my team of magnificent misfits and smiled. "We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to take their carefully planned, perfectly executed invasion and turn it into the galaxy's most expensive fireworks show." Nova cracked her knuckles. "I love it when you talk dirty, Tank." "Ruby, how many of your toys can we get combat ready in 20 hours? "All of them, assuming we're okay with a 30% chance of accidentally creating a black hole." "I'll take those odds." "Crash, how many birds can you get airborne?" "Define airborne." "If we're talking controlled flight, maybe 12. If we're talking violent hurling through space with occasional steering, all 17. "Perfect. Nova, I need you to dig deeper into their communications. Find me something we can exploit." As my team scattered to prepare for what would either be humanity's finest hour or its most spectacular failure, I stood alone in the hangar. looking at our cobbled-together fleet of modified fighters, experimental bombers, and one particularly dangerous-looking ship that Ruby refused to explain beyond saying it was conceptually aggressive. 22 hours to save the world with junk and attitude. I'd had worse Tuesdays. 18 hours until humanity's deadline, and I was standing in front of a whiteboard covered in diagrams that looked like the fever dreams of a demented engineer, which, considering Ruby had drawn most of them, was probably accurate. Okay, people, let's review our master plan one more time, just so we're all clear on exactly how we're going to die. Ruby bounced on her toes like an excited puppy. Oh, can I go first, please? Ruby, explain your weapons package without using the words theoretical or catastrophic failure. She opened her mouth, closed it, thought for a moment, then opened it again. That's harder than it sounds, Tank. Just give me the basics. Right, so we have the gravity pulse cannons, which should create localized space-time distortions that tear apart molecular bonds. The plasma lance array that fires concentrated stellar matter at significant fractions of light speed. And my personal favorite, the entropy bombs. Crash raised his hand. I'm afraid to ask, but what's an entropy bomb? It's a device that rapidly increases the rate of decay in whatever it hits. Basically, it ages the target about 1,000 years in 30 seconds. And you tested this how? Well, I haven't exactly tested it per se, but the mathematical models are very promising. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. Nova, please tell me you have better news. Nova looked up from her screens with the expression of someone who'd just discovered something fascinating and terrible. I'd been monitoring their fleet communications, and I found something interesting. They're not warriors, Tank. They're bureaucrats with really big guns. Explain. Every ship in their fleet follows the same communication protocols. Status reports every hour, confirmation requests for every action, approval chains that go up at least 5 levels of command. They're running this invasion like a corporate merger. And that helps us how? Because bureaucrats hate surprises, they hate improvisation. And they absolutely hate having their carefully planned schedules disrupted. Nova's grin could have powered a small city. Tank, these idiots have never dealt with anyone crazy enough to fight back. Crash leaned forward. So what's the plan? I turned to the whiteboard and started drawing. The plan is simple. We're going to hit them with everything we have, all at once, in the most chaotic, unpredictable way possible. That's not a plan, Tank. That's barely organized suicide. Exactly. They're expecting surrender, or maybe some token resistance they can crush easily. They're not expecting 17 ships piloted by certifiable lunatics armed with weapons that shouldn't exist. Ruby clapped her hands together. Oh, I love it. We're going to weaponize chaos theory. Nova, I need you to hack their communication network and feed them false information. Convince them we have more ships than we actually do. Already on it. I've created ghost signals for about 50 additional ships. Their sensors should be picking up phantom contacts all over the system. Crash, you and your pilots are going to use your special talent for making controlled flight look like barely controlled falling. Make them think our ships are malfunctioning right up until the moment you start shooting. My favorite kind of flying. Maximum confusion, minimum predictability. Ruby, your job is to make sure that when we start shooting, we're shooting things that have never been shot before in the history of galactic warfare. Tank, you beautiful genius, you're going to let me field test every weapon I've ever dreamed up. I looked at my team of magnificent disasters and felt something that might have been confidence if confidence usually came with a side of mild terror. People, in 15 hours, we're going to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a species too stupid to know when it's beaten. Nova held up her tablet. Tank, I'm getting something from their command ship. It's addressed to the planetary leadership. Put it on speaker. The same cultured voice from earlier filled the room. People of Earth, we have detected increased activity in your orbital space. We assume you are preparing to surrender your military assets as requested. This is acceptable. Continue your compliance, and your integration into the Dominion will proceed smoothly. The message ended, and the room was silent for a moment. Then Crash started laughing. "They think we're getting ready to surrender." Ruby giggled. "They have no idea what's coming." Nova cracked her knuckles. "Tank, I think I can do better than ghost signals. Give me another hour, and I can make their entire fleet think it's under attack by invisible ships." I looked at the countdown timer on the wall, 14 hours and 37 minutes, until showtime. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go make some history. The stupidly dangerous kind that future generations will either celebrate or pretend never happened. As my team scattered to their final preparations, I stayed in the conference room, staring at our pathetic collection of experimental ships and untested weapons. By any rational measure, this plan was doomed to fail catastrophically. Which was exactly why it might just work. 10 minutes before launch, and everything that could go wrong had gone wrong, was currently going wrong, or was warming up in the bullpen to go wrong shortly. Crash's fighter had developed what he cheerfully called aggressive steering, which meant it pulled hard to the left and occasionally tried to fly upside down. Ruby's gravity pulse cannon had passed all its safety tests, assuming you defined passed as didn't immediately create a singularity. And Nova's communication jamming system was working so well it had temporarily knocked out our own radios. "Tank," came Crash's voice over the comm, slightly distorted by what sounded like grinding metal. "I've got good news and bad news about my bird." "Give me the bad news first." "The bad news is my navigation system thinks we're currently parked inside the sun. My weapons targeting keeps locking onto my own tail. And something in the engine compartment is making a noise like an angry whale." "And the good news?" "The good news is it still flies, and the angry whale noise seems to make other ships nervous." Above us, the alien fleet maintained its perfect formation. 2,000 ships arranged in geometric precision that probably looked impressive to civilizations that appreciated order and planning. Unfortunately for them, they were about to encounter humanity's special talent for turning order into beautiful chaos. "Nova, status on their communications?" "I've got good penetration into their network, Tank. They're still running status reports every hour like clockwork. Current topic of discussion seems to be resource allocation for post-conquest mining operations. They're planning the strip mining operation before they've even finished the conquest." "The bureaucrats, Tank. They probably have forms to fill out for the apocalypse." Ruby's voice crackled over the comm from her position in the experimental weapons platform she'd nicknamed the Probability Violator. "Tank, I'm reading some interesting energy signatures from their ships. I think I know why they're so confident. Enlighten me." "Enlighten me." "Their weapons are designed for orbital bombardment, not ship-to-ship combat. Those are planet crackers, not dogfighting guns. They're built to hover in orbit and methodically blast cities, not to deal with small, fast-moving targets shooting back." I felt something that might have been hope if hope usually came with a side of homicidal glee. "So you're telling me their ships are basically flying siege engines?" "Exactly. Big, powerful, and about as maneuverable as a brick with delusions of grandeur." "All ships, this is Tank. Launch in T-minus 60 seconds. Remember, the plan is to be completely unpredictable, utterly chaotic, and absolutely relentless. If you can think of a sensible tactical decision, don't make it." The countdown reached 0, and 17 ships that had no business flying launched into space with all the grace and precision of a controlled explosion. Crash's fighter immediately proved its aggressive steering by spiraling wildly through the launch sequence, it somehow managing to avoid colliding with anything while looking like it was completely out of control. The alien ships began adjusting their formations, clearly trying to track what they assumed was a malfunctioning vessel. That's when Ruby opened fire. The gravity pulse cannon created a localized space-time distortion that hit the nearest alien ship like a cosmic sledgehammer. The ship didn't explode so much as suddenly discover that its molecular bonds had become more of a suggestion than a requirement. It came apart in a cascade of glittering debris that spread out in patterns that hurt to look at. The alien fleet's perfect formation immediately began adjusting to respond to this new threat, their ships moving with the precise choreography of a military organization that had never been surprised by anything. which made it even more satisfying when Nova's jamming system kicked in and every alien ship suddenly started receiving targeting data that placed enemy contacts inside their own hulls. "Tank, their command frequency is going crazy," Nova reported, barely containing her laughter. "They're trying to figure out how we got boarding parties onto their ships without actually boarding them." Crash's apparent loss of control had drawn the attention of a dozen alien ships, their massive weapons slowly tracking his erratic flight path. That's when he revealed that his random spiraling had positioned him perfectly behind their formation, and suddenly his malfunctioning. Fighter was strafing their rear guard with precision that would have been impossible to achieve through actual planning. "Tank," Crash called out, his voice vibrating with barely controlled glee. "I think I'm in love with your insane plan." The alien response was swift and overwhelming. 200 ships turned their attention to our tiny fleet, their planet-cracking weapons charging up for a coordinated strike that should have reduced us to constituent atoms. That's when Ruby revealed her second surprise. "Entropy bombs away," she announced cheerfully, and 17 devices that violated several laws of physics streaked toward the alien formation. The bombs didn't explode. They aged. 17 alien ships suddenly experienced 1,000 years of entropy in 30 seconds. Hull plating corroded, weapons systems decayed, and internal mechanisms simply wore out from centuries of use that happened in half a minute. The alien fleet's perfect formation began to collapse as ships found themselves trying to coordinate with vessels that were literally falling apart from old age. "Nova, what's their chatter looking like?" "Tank, I'm picking up words I don't recognize, but the tone suggests they're having the worst day in Dominion history. Someone just used what I think translates to impossible tactical nonsense in reference to our attack pattern." That's when the aliens made their first tactical mistake. They tried to adapt. Instead of sticking to their proven orbital bombardment strategy, they began trying to engage us in ship-to-ship combat. Massive vessels designed for methodical planet killing suddenly found themselves trying to track small, fast-moving targets that were shooting at them with weapons that shouldn't exist. Ruby's plasma lance array carved through their formations like a hot knife through butter made of space-time. Crash's squadron of supposedly malfunctioning fighters danced through their defensive fire with moves that looked accidental but were devastatingly effective. And Nova's phantom fleet of ghost signals had them shooting at targets that weren't there while missing the ones that were. "Tank," Ruby called out, "I'm getting some lovely readings from their command ship. I think their tactical computer just had what you might call a nervous breakdown." Above us, the most powerful military force in the galaxy was learning the hard way that humans don't fight fair, don't follow rules, and absolutely refuse to lose gracefully. And we were just getting started. 20 minutes into the battle, and the alien fleet was discovering that fighting humans was like trying to nail jelly to a wall while the jelly shot back with weapons that violated the laws of physics. "Tank," Nova's voice crackled over the comm. "I'm intercepting some fascinating communications from their command ship. Apparently their tactical computer has officially categorized our fighting style as chaotic neutral with genocidal tendencies." Ruby's laughter echoed across the radio frequency. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my weapons design philosophy." The Dominion fleet was adapting, but not in ways that helped them. They'd broken their perfect formation, trying to respond to threats that moved like drunken hummingbirds and hit like concentrated stars. Ships designed for orbital bombardment were attempting dogfight maneuvers, with predictable results. "Crash, how's your squadron holding up?" "Tank, I've got to say, flying broken ships against enemies who expect things to work properly is the most fun I've had since I accidentally invaded Canadian airspace during that training exercise." Through the chaos, I watched Ruby's probability violator dance between alien ships, its experimental weapons creating effects that probably required new branches of physics to explain. A plasma lance punched through 3 ships in a row, the superheated stellar matter maintaining coherence long enough to demonstrate why you don't mess with a species that weaponizes stars for fun. That's when the aliens made their second tactical mistake. They called for reinforcements. "Nova, please tell me those aren't more ships dropping out of hyperspace." Okay, I won't tell you that 500 additional Dominion vessels just arrived to help with what their command structure is now calling the Earth problem. I looked at our fleet status. We'd lost 2 ships to enemy fire, 3 more to what Ruby cheerfully called enthusiastic weapons testing, and Crash's fighter was now steering entirely through controlled explosions. Against a fresh force of 500 ships, we were beyond outnumbered. We were mathematically extinct, which was apparently exactly what Ruby had been waiting for. Tank. Remember how I mentioned I'd been reverse engineering alien technology for a few years? Ruby, please tell me you haven't been building weapons in your spare time without telling anyone. Okay, I won't tell you that. I also won't mention that I've been waiting for exactly this kind of target-rich environment to test my masterpiece. Before I could ask what her masterpiece was, Ruby's ship began charging something that made every sensor in the fleet scream warnings about imminent reality failure. Ruby, what the hell is that energy signature? Tank, meet the Cascade Initiative. It's what happens when you take alien shield technology, reverse the polarity, amplify it by about 1,000%, and use it to create a chain reaction that turns enemy shields into very expensive fireworks. The weapon fired, and suddenly the universe got very interested in what Ruby had been building in her spare time. The energy pulse hit the lead ship of the reinforcement fleet, and its shields didn't just fail. They inverted, becoming a localized field that began converting the ship's own armor into pure energy. That energy jumped to the next ship, then the next, creating a cascade effect that rippled through the enemy formation like dominoes made of exploding stars. In 30 seconds, 500 ships became 500 very bright lights and a rapidly expanding debris field. The original alien fleet stopped shooting, not because they were out of ammunition, but because they were apparently having a collective existential crisis about a species that could turn their own technology against them in ways that made their gods weep. Nova, what's the chatter now? Tank, I'm picking up what I think is the alien equivalent of "how did they do that?" repeated about 40 times, followed by something that translates roughly to "we're not paid enough for this level of insanity." The remaining Dominion ships began a fighting retreat, their perfect formations dissolving into something that looked suspiciously like panic. But they weren't running fast enough for Ruby's taste. Tank, I've got one more surprise for our departing guests. Ruby, please tell me you're not about to do something that violates the Geneva Convention. Tank, we're in space. The Geneva Convention doesn't technically apply here. Her final weapon was something she'd been too embarrassed to name, so she just called it Project Oops. It was designed to overload enemy jump drives at the moment of activation, essentially trapping ships in hyperspace indefinitely. 17 Dominion command ships discovered that leaving Earth's system required more than just wanting to be somewhere else very badly. The remaining alien fleet, now reduced to roughly half its original strength and completely demoralized, sent a final transmission to Earth. This engagement is concluded. Your world has been reclassified from integration target to avoid at all costs. The Dominion Collective will not return. As the alien ships limped away into hyperspace, leaving behind debris fields that would puzzle xenoarchaeologists for centuries, I sat in my command ship and contemplated what we'd just accomplished. We'd taken 17 ships held together with determination and spite, crewed them with magnificent lunatics, armed them with weapons that shouldn't exist, and somehow convinced the galaxy's most powerful military force that Earth was more trouble than it was worth. Tank, Ruby's voice came over the comm. I think we just became the galaxy's problem children. Ruby, I replied, watching the last alien ship disappear into hyperspace. I think that was always the plan. 3 months after what historians would eventually call the Tuesday War, I was sitting in my office trying to explain to a very nervous admiral why our defense budget request included line items for theoretical weapons that probably won't kill everyone. Aids and coffee, premium grade, for dealing with galactic bureaucracy. The phone rang. It had been ringing a lot lately. Commander Morrison, Strategic Defense Command. Greetings, Commander Morrison. This is Ambassador Zeth Cry of the Galactic Mediation Council. We need to discuss your species. I leaned back in my chair and put my feet up on the desk. Over the past 3 months, I'd received similar calls from the Regalian Trade Federation, the Andromedan Peace Collective, and something called the League of Concerned Civilizations. Apparently, word was getting around that Earth was inhabited by dangerous lunatics who fought with junk and won. Ambassador, how can I help you today? Commander, we understand that your world recently repelled a Dominion invasion force using unconventional tactics. That's one way to put it. Ruby prefers aggressive problem-solving with extreme prejudice, but I think your version is more diplomatic. Commander, the Dominion Collective has filed formal complaints with 17 different galactic organizations claiming that your species engages in warfare practices that violate the natural order of reality. I looked out my window at Hangar 7, where Ruby was probably building something that would give physicists nightmares, and Crash was test flying a ship that had no business staying airborne. Nova had intercepted communications suggesting that 3 different alien civilizations were developing human countermeasures for their military forces. Ambassador, I'm curious. What exactly constitutes a violation of the natural order of reality? Well, according to their filing, your weapons appear to function on principles that our best scientists describe as aggressively theoretical. Your tactical decisions seem to be based on what they call weaponized randomness. And your pilots apparently fly as if death is merely a suggestion rather than a natural law. Sounds about right. Is there a problem with any of that? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Commander, the Galactic Mediation Council has reviewed the incident reports, and we've reached a consensus. We would like to offer your species membership in the galactic community, with full diplomatic status and trade privileges. I nearly dropped the phone. Really? That's unexpectedly civilized of you. Commander, every civilization in this galaxy has spent thousands of years learning to fight according to established tactical doctrines, using weapons based on proven scientific principles, following strategies that make logical sense. And in one afternoon, your species took all of that accumulated military wisdom and used it as kindling for a bonfire of chaos that sent the Dominion running like their tails were on fire. Ambassador, is this the part where you tell us we're too dangerous to be left alone? Commander, this is the part where we tell you that half the galaxy wants to hire you as mercenaries and the other half wants to give you tribute to leave them alone. I looked at my calendar, where I'd been scheduling meetings with various alien ambassadors who wanted to discuss everything from defense contracts to non-aggression pacts. Apparently, the galaxy had decided that humans were the kind of neighbors you wanted to stay on good terms with. There is one small condition to your membership in the galactic community. Of course there is. What's the catch? We need you to promise that you won't teach your combat techniques to anyone else. The balance of power in this galaxy is delicate enough without multiple species learning to weaponize physics violations. I thought about Ruby's latest project, which she described as a gun that shoots conceptual problems at people. I considered Crash's new squadron of pilots who'd learned that the best way to avoid enemy fire was to fly in patterns that hurt to look at. I contemplated Nova's communication arrays, which could now hack alien computers by insulting their operating systems in languages that didn't technically exist. Ambassador, I think I can promise that our particular brand of organized chaos will remain uniquely human. Excellent. We'll send the membership paperwork immediately. Welcome to the galactic community, Commander Morrison. After I hung up the phone, I walked down to Hangar 7, where my team was already working on upgrades to our fleet. Ruby was explaining to a group of engineers why her new gravity manipulator needed a warning label that read "Do not aim at planets." Crash was teaching a new class of pilots that sometimes the best flight plan was to have no flight plan at all. Nova was decoding alien languages that she'd discovered by accidentally intercepting transmissions from parallel dimensions. "Tank," Ruby called out when she saw me. "Did you hear the news? Apparently 3 different alien governments have officially added Earth-style tactics to their military training manuals as examples of what not to do. And 2 more have created new categories of war crimes specifically because of our last battle," Nova added cheerfully. Crash looked up from the flight simulator he'd been modifying. I heard the Dominion has started using recordings of our battle as psychological warfare against their enemies. I looked at my magnificent team of Chaos agents and smiled. We'd gone from being humanity's last desperate hope to being the galaxy's newest nightmare. From a strategic perspective, it was the best possible outcome. From a practical perspective, it meant we'd probably have to save the galaxy again next Tuesday. But hey, at least this time we'd have better coffee. "All right, people," I said, settling into my command chair and looking at the tactical displays showing our new status as the galaxy's most reluctantly respected military force. "Let's see what kind of trouble the universe wants to throw at us next." Outside the hangar, Earth continued its orbit around the Sun, but blissfully unaware that it had become known throughout the galaxy as the small blue planet inhabited by deranged tactical geniuses who fought dirty and loved every minute of it. And somewhere in the depths of space, alien civilizations were learning that when you threaten humanity, you don't just get a fight. You get a physics lesson. Whether you want one or not.